Good morning, everyone. This is Elayne at Anabellas. Welcome back to Cross Stitch School, lesson number 2. Today, we're going to do just 2 things. I'm going to teach you a little bit about the different types of floss that is available to you as a new cross stitcher. And I'm also going to show you how when you start your cross stitch, you're going to have to start it a little bit differently when you're using what we call fancy floss or variegated floss. Then I'm going to teach you how to stitch across a row using half stitches and then come back across that row and complete your X, rather than what we did last week, which was make 1 X at a time all the way across the row. So before we get started on that, let me show you these different types of floss. We carry DMC, we carry the entire line of DMC, the entire line of Classic Colorworks, and most of Weeks Dye Works, which we're adding. We also, color and cotton is another type of fancy floss that is also very popular. Now, if you look at a skein of DMC floss, and this is across all colors in the DMC family, what you're going to find is there's no color variation in the cotton embroidery floss. The floss strand, if you were to pull it out, the strand is going to be 100% the same all the way through the strand. There's going to be no changes in the color. So when you stitch with this, your color red, this color red, is going to look identical throughout every single stitch that you make. Now, Classic Colorworks, if you can see this, it's very easily identifiable that there are variegations in the floss itself. There's a very dark strand here and then a lighter strand. I actually see maybe 3 types of color variations as I'm looking at this particular skein. So when you stitch with variegated threads, and let me show you Weeks Dye Works too. So Weeks Dye Works is the same. Can you see those color variations? How they are very distinct? So that means that when you're stitching, you're going to see the way this lays on your fabric. Some of your stitches may look a little light, others one may look a little dark, and some may be a mixture of both light and dark as you make your cross stitches. Now, what is recommended when you stitch with these types of variegated floss is 2 things. One is that you thread your needle a little bit differently. You're not going to use the hoop method. You're going to use a different method, which I'm going to show you now. And they do recommend that you complete your X individually. So you're not going to use, you're not going to stitch a half a stitch all the way across a row and then come back. You're going to stitch using this type of floss exactly the way I taught you last week. You're going to complete your X for every single stitch that you place on your fabric. And that is going to give you a beautiful look with your fancy floss. So this isn't anything that we're going to stitch with today. This is just something I wanted you to know about, because as you begin cross stitching, you may see that these types of embroidery floss is available to you, and you may think, what's the difference? Should I buy that? You most certainly should and could, you know, but just, you know, try to keep in mind this lesson so that when you begin your project, you're not disappointed by stitching it, you know, the wrong way. Okay. All right. So using fancy floss, let me show you how you're going to thread your needle a little bit differently. So last week we used the loop method, and I showed you how to bring 2 of your ends together and then thread your needle. For this method, when using fancy floss, you're just going to take your 1 strand, like I showed you, you pull it out, and you're just going to thread your needle using one strand is going to go through the eye of the needle rather than both ends together. So you're going to have 1 strand. After you have your 1 strand, what you're going to do is you're just going to pull it down and bring your 2 ends together. Okay, and if you need to make a quick snip, I just did. If you need to make a quick snip to keep those nice and clean, you should do that. Then what you're going to do when you start stitching with fancy floss, and I'm going to just do this now today as I teach you also how to do a row, you're going to come up in your bottom left, you're going to go down in your top right, and you're going to turn it over, and you're going to see your floss come through. Then when this comes through, you know, you're not going to have a hoop. So what you're going to do is I just take my floss, I kind of wrap it around that, and then I take my finger and I just kind of hold that down. okay? Then whether you're going to stitch all the way across the row in a half stitch or not, or you're going to stitch like I did last week, making a complete X, I always anchor my first stitch by making a full cross stitch. So there's my full cross stitch because I want to anchor that first stitch, okay? Now on my back, I still have my thread hanging here. What I want to do is kind of get it laying flat, going in the same direction that I'm going to be stitching, meaning to the right, so that it gets tucked under my stitches. So now, just like I taught you last week, you're going to come up in the bottom left of the stitch you just created. If I can find the hole. I can't find the hole. My eyes this morning, oh my goodness. Because I'm trying to hold that floss in the back and I'm stabbing myself, which is normal. There we go. Okay, so you're going to come up in the bottom left, then you're going to go down in the top right. And as I do that, I can see, you know, that I want to keep tucking my floss underneath. Then I'm going to just keep going. This is half stitches. This is what I promised you I would show you how to stitch a row. Bottom left of the stitch I just finished, top right of the half stitch. There's my third. Bottom left. Grab my needle. Top right. And as I'm doing this, what's happening is my thread, as you can see right here, is laying flat and it's getting very gently tucked under those stitches. And that is going to help hide it, just like it's hidden when you do the hoop method. Okay, so we're going to keep going and we're going to do a row of maybe 10 or 12 of these half stitches. So just keep going, bottom left, top right, bottom left, top right, and just stitch along. And you'll get into a rhythm. I find this very therapeutic. Some people say that doing these half stitches helps them stitch faster than doing a full stitch. I don't know. You know, it takes the same amount of time to make an X as it does to go across. You got to go back, so that takes up time too. So I don't know. You could time it. But, you know, if you're making an X, that takes time. Now, if you're going to go all the way across and then have to go all the way back, that's still going to take up some time. So whatever works for you. Now, remember, this is important. When you're stitching with the fancy floss, when you're stitching with this type of floss, you always want to complete your X one by one. Don't go across in a row. You'll lose the beauty of stitching with the variegated floss. You will not see the variegations in your piece. Okay, so keep going. Top left, bottom right, and whoops, let's look in the back here and see how our hidden floss is coming. So I'm almost at the very end of the row. You see I have this little piece right here. You can keep hiding it, or when you've got that many stitches in, you can feel free to just go ahead and snip it off if you'd like. I'm not going to snip it though. I'm just going to let it go because I let it go a little too long. It's a little short. I don't want to snip anything. What am I doing here? Okay, so we're going to keep going. Top, bottom left, top right. I always get a little fuzzy. That's a brown fuzzy from the last week. And then one more time, bottom left, and top right. Okay. Now I'm very happy with my row. As you can see, the stitches are pretty consistent, right? They're all going in one direction. I started all of them in the bottom left and completed my half stitch in the top right. Now what I need to do is I need to go across the row in the opposite direction. So I'm going to work from the bottom right to the top left, and I'm going to go ahead and make those half stitches whole cross stitches. So I'm going to take my needle, the stitch I just completed, I'm now going to go directly down into the bottom right of this stitch. You see? Bottom right of that stitch. Then I'm going to come up and I'm going to go in the top left, and I have just completed the first X on the row, the first cross stitch. So now you're going to come into the bottom right of the stitch you just completed. Bottom right of the stitch you just completed. Come up to the top left, and that is cross stitch number 2. Now if you're counting, because you remember you're counting how many X's you need to make across your row, I just count in my head as I go. So that's 2. Then I'm going bottom right, the stitch I just completed, to the top left. That's 3. I'm gonna let my floss hang so it doesn't get tangled. Look at my back, it's nice and clean. Nothing's jumbled. Top, whoops, bottom right. Oh, goodness gracious. Everything happens for a reason. Bottom right, top left. Okay, and just keep going until you complete your row. So let me do that real quick. So this is how we stitch. We just go along our merry way and complete our row. And as I said, you will find a rhythm. Right now, you may feel very uncomfortable. You may feel like you've got butter fingers. You might have cramps in your fingers because you're gripping your fabric so tight. You may have stabbed yourself a number of times because you're not used to stitching this way. All of those things are okay. I promise you that you're going to get a rhythm, and this is all going to come to you, and it's going to be like riding a bike. You're going to pick up your cross stitch a couple months from now, or maybe a couple weeks from now, and you're going to say, this is so easy. Okay, there you go. So that row is complete. I turn it over, and it's done. So if I were to finish the row now, and I was done doing a particular color or a particular row, and I needed to stop and rethread my needle or move to a different part of the chart, and you can't travel more than a few places, you would take your needle now, and in order to finish it off, I just want to very gently stick it under a few stitches, weaving up and down very carefully, turning it over to make sure it's not popping through. Then I always just tap the needle, grab it, and very gently pull it through. And look how nice that's laying. Then I just take my scissors, which I threw somewhere, and I'm going to snip this off very close to the fabric. And there you go. So that row is complete. And now, so you've learned how to stitch across a row using a half a stitch rather than a full stitch. So today what we said that we were going to work on is we are going to now work on the door. Your homework was to complete these, come down here to frame the doorway, and then if you were comfortable to go across and complete the steps. So I did that as well. I came down and completed each frame, and then I completed my steps. Now, one of the things that I always do is I told you to take your chart and make sure you cross off with your pencil as you go. So I did cross off my doorway frame, but I have not crossed off my step. So just to make sure, I want to make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. And I'm going to look here. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know I did that correctly. I'm going to take my pencil now, and I'm just going to very gently cross those off. So I'm done with that. Okay, now what we need to do is we want to today stitch the door, and we are going to do that using half stitches just so that you get used to that method of stitching. You're very comfortable now maybe doing a full stitch because you did it up here, the eave of the house, and you did it down here on the steps. So now we're going to work on the door, and we're going to do full stitches. I'm going to start in the top left right here of the doorway, and I'm going to go across my row. And I'm going to count how many stitches I need. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to need 8 stitches. I'm going to look at my legend here, and I need DMC 518, which is blue. It's the same blue that we're going to use here and here. So I take my strand, 518. You're going to go ahead and thread your needle. And I taught you that you're going to thread it now the way that I showed you when you're doing a half a stitch. You can go ahead and bring your 2 ends together because you're not using a variegated floss. So bring your 2 ends together and go ahead and make your hoop method. And once you have that done, you can meet me here. And we're going to start up at the top, and we're going to do 8 stitches across. So you're going to come directly down into this hole here. So that's the bottom left of this brown stitch, bottom left, and then you're going to go top right, and then you made the hoop method. So go ahead and tuck your thread through the hoop, and then come back up bottom right of the same area, your bottom right of the stitch you just placed. Oh, I caught my finger. The whole thing fell out. Okay, gotta do that again. I'm like Butterfingers today. Okay, so bottom left, top right, make your hoop, and then you're gonna come bottom right and top left, because I'm going to anchor that first stitch, remember? That's what I like to do. I like to anchor that. Then you're going to come into the stitch you just completed. You're going to come to the bottom left, and then you're going to come up to the top right, and you're just going to work all the way across the row. Bottom left, top right, and you need 8 stitches, so there should be, so that's, whoops, tangled. Okay, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, and my floss is getting ready to tangle, so I'm going to let it drop. 7, and 8. Okay, so I've gone all the way across the row, and I've done my 8 stitches, and now I need to go back in the opposite direction and complete the X. So I'm going to, where the stitch that I just completed, this half stitch, I'm going to the right, so it's the bottom right of that square. I'm going to come up, and I'm going to go down into the top left, which is right there. Same thing, bottom right of the stitch I just completed, and top left. Bottom right, top left. So just keep going all the way across the row. And I don't need to count across out loud or in my head the second time, because I already know that I've got 8 stitches. And I don't actually have to count for the next couple of rows, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute, because I can't screw up. I can't go outside the frame of the doorway, so I'm trapped in here, and I know I'm good as long as I'm careful of the doorknob. And if you look at your chart, you'll see that there is a doorknob that is worked into this blue door, and you're going to have to adjust your stitch count to allow for that doorknob. So what you're going to do is just stitch across all the way, and then we're going to do the doorknob. So I'm going to pause here, I'm going to finish, and I'm going to stop right here. So we're going to do, we just did row 1, so I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 more rows of 8 and pause. So I'll be right back. Okay, so you should have now completed 4 rows total, counting across 8. So now what we need to do is we need to work in the doorbell. So you're going to come back to right underneath your 4th row, and you're going to count how many stitches you have to place before you get to the doorknob. So you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I'm going to have you do is you're going to make 2 rows of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're going to, so do that first, make those 2 rows first. And the reason I don't want you to jump over and do the 2 that are here is I find that that is just not the best method, because when you go to add the color of this doorknob, if underneath it is blue running across the back of your chart, sometimes it will cause a problem by popping through and messing up your pretty white or your cream color right here. So just, you know, I'm teaching you how I do it. So my recommendation is that you don't travel across colors. So just go ahead and do your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 real quick, you know, 2 rows of 5. So I'm gonna just do that with you real quick. So you're just gonna come up underneath your 4th row, and you just want to do 2 rows of 5. So that's 1, and I'm starting fresh with floss. So there's my hoop. I'm anchoring my first stitch, And I'm going to count out loud because I have to count 5 stitches. So that's 1, 2, and remember we're doing a half a stitch, 3, 4, and 5. And let me pause here and just show you that some people will skip the next 2 squares and they'll come over here and they'll complete the last stitch on the row, which is the stitch closest to the door frame, you know, that's on the other side of the doorknob. I don't recommend that you do that. So you're gonna come back to the 5th stitch that you just did, and you're gonna go back across to the left, bottom right, top left, and you're gonna keep finishing your row. You're gonna do 1 more row of 5. And again, I don't have to count anymore because I know I counted right the first time. So I can just, you know, stitch or talk. Because if I'm talking and stitching, I sometimes make mistakes. So, okay, so this is, whoops, got a little knot. Okay, and there we go. Okay, let me let this dangle. All right, now I'm gonna do 1 more row of 5. I'm gonna come up. Oh, my needle just came out. All right, let me rethread that. It happens. This is real life. Needles come out. And you just gotta stop what you're doing and rethread it. And it's usually because I'm rushing, which is what I'm doing now. So that's the problem. Okay, so there we go. I just wanna do 5. 5 more. 1, 2. I have a little knot in my thread and I'm forcing it through because it's a very tiny knot. If you have a big knot in your thread, see that? You should go ahead and snip and rethread your needle and don't push that through. I'm doing it just because I want to teach you how to quickly get through this row. But normally I would say, don't do what I'm doing. Snip the knot, get rid of it, rethread your needle, and don't have anything impeding your nice smooth stitches. However, you know, I'm the teacher, so I can get away with it. Okay, so I'm gonna go back across my row now, complete my 5. That's 1. And I don't need to count, but I'm doing it anyways. This is getting tangled. And 2. Sometimes I just take it and I make sure that it's laying right. Okay. All right, and then we have 3. And my knot is pretty much gone. And 1 more, and I'm done. Okay, so there you go. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna come up here after you cross off what you've done on your chart. So you've done 2 rows of 5. So you're gonna cross that off. Now what you're gonna do is we're gonna start underneath the row we just completed. We're gonna go all the way across and then we're gonna go up 2. So go all the way across and then go up 2. 1, 2. You can travel up 2 and then you're gonna come back down to this row and you're going to complete the rest of that. So I'll do 1 row with you and then you'll do your homework and finish the rest. So we're just going to come across 1 full row. And again, I don't need to count because I know that there's 8 across. This thing is really tangling today. And then you just keep going. Okay, a couple more. That's 1 and 2. And last one on this row. Okay, now let me show you what you're gonna do. I'm gonna show you what I do. Your half stitches all the way across are fine. Don't worry, you don't have to go back right now and finish them. I'm gonna come up one. I'm gonna come up above the stitch I just completed, because if you look on your chart, this is the row I just completed. I have 2 stitches that I have to put in, 2 blue stitches. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do those 2 blue stitches, bottom left, top right, but I'm gonna complete each of those completely. Okay, so just complete your stitch. This got tangled back here again. Hold on, I have to untangle this. Tangle, tangle. Okay, put that in. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna put in 2 stitches to the left of the door frame. I can't believe this is happening. I just pulled the thread out a second time. What can I tell you, ladies? This is how it is. You get to be really good at threading your needle quickly when you're cross stitching. Okay, so I'm gonna put 1 there. And I'm gonna complete my X. And I'm gonna do 1 more right above it. As soon as I get this untangled. Okay. And 1 more right above it. Whoops. Okay. And 1 more. Finish that X. And there we go. Okay, so I have my 2 stitches in right next to the doorknob. And now I'm gonna come back down. It's okay to travel. I'm gonna come to the bottom right of the last stitch on the full row that we completed. And I'm just gonna go back across and finish the row. So there you go. Just gonna keep going all the way across. And my row will be complete. And then all that you need to do is you will go ahead and complete, looks like 1, 2, 3 more rows of blue beneath this one, and your door will be complete, except for the doorknob color. And you can go ahead and do that yourself because I'm confident you know how to do that. You'll just take your DMC 543, which is the correct color for the symbol that's on your chart, for that nice cream color. So rethread your needle after you're done with the blue and go ahead and complete your doorknob. So you're going to put in 4 stitches. All right, so that's the row that's finished. Come back up here, finish those last 3 rows, and then when you're done with that, make sure to color it all in that you've done it and finish your doorknob. Okay, so now let's talk about what I want you to do before we meet next week. Because you're already working with blue, I want you to go ahead and pop down and I want you to work on the word home. So what I'm gonna do is, just for teaching purposes, I'm gonna erase the steps here because I wanna show you how to count. Okay, I don't want you to count from here. You could. I want you to count from, you know what? No, I want you to count from here. So what you're going to do is you're going to come to the last step, the last stitch on the step, and you're going to count down 1, 2, 3, and you're going to put your needle at the very last stitch on the word home. So your needle is going to go, you're going to do this stitch right here, which is the last stitch on the H, the tail of the H right here. So here's your last step, the last stitch in your step. 1 square, 2 square, 3 square. So you should have 3 squares, and then you're going to put in your 4th is where you're going to begin. So I'm going to show you that right now so that you understand what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to come up. Here's the last step right here. Let me show you with my needle. There's my last step right above it. So that's 1 hole. That's 1X. 2 square. I'm sorry, 1 square, 2 square, 3 square. And I'm going to come up right here and I'm going to make an X. That is my first stitch. That's this first stitch. And now I can see that I should have 1, 2, 3 squares above it. So I'm going to look. I'm going to count. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. So I know I placed that X in the correct hole. And I know that I have to do 2 more next to it. So look here. I just did this one right here. So I'm going to color that in. I have to do 1, 2 more. So there's 1, and there's 2, and I'm using half stitches. At this point, you may have already decided what your preference is, whether you like to stitch half stitches or if you want to stitch full stitches, meaning you complete each X as you go. If you're not sure yet, that's okay. Just do whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, so now that's done. So I've got all 3 stitches done right here. And now what I have to do is I have to come down. How many do I have to come down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you're going to stitch, you're going to come to your last stitch, and you're going to do 11 more right below it. Remember what I tried to tell you last week. You have to learn, even though it's a pain, to count twice and stitch once. So count them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you need to do 11 stitches. So that's what you're going to do, ladies. Just go ahead and do your 11, add 1. You can travel over, so you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to put your needle in your 5th, do 2 stitches, go up 11, do 2 more stitches, then count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then when you get to your row where you counted 8, you're just going to go ahead and cross your H. All right? Then go ahead and count over 1 and start your O and just complete the word home. If you're comfortable doing that, you can skip down by counting down and then complete this entire row. All right? So that's your homework for this coming week. Go ahead and complete the doorway. Go ahead and stitch the word home, and go ahead and do the bottom if you're comfortable doing it. Then next week, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and work on the pink house and work in the windows. I thought we would do it this week, but the way that I decided to teach you when you already had your needle threaded and you were this close to, another color, the same color on your chart, to go ahead and stick with that. So today, just to recap, we covered Fancy Floss. In your class notes, there'll be more information that you can read and keep for future reference. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, be happy, be well, and most of all, be kind. See you soon. Bye-bye.